So today I want to talk about the stages of belief that I experience. Now, these won't be the stages of belief that other people experience, that you might experience, but in my journey into and through Hinduism, and to the point I am now, I experience stages of belief, stages that can be described in basic summaries. But we can go ahead and start off with the baseline of Hinduism. Okay, I'm Hindu. There's some basic beliefs in Hinduism. God is basically everything. Everything is a part of God. The different gods that we worship are different functions of that one God, different pieces, and human beings, other life forms, are smaller pieces. And everything is permeated with consciousness and soul. There's a multiverse, there are many dimensions of existence, and time operates differently in these dimensions. And when we consider the world, when we look at Earth, we have to realize that there's only one planet that has life on it, and there are many planets with life. In this universe, in the multiverse, and in different dimensions, there's consciousness and sentient consciousness throughout all of this existence. And the gods that we recognize, we might call by one name, and the gods that other beings recognize will call by another name, but that doesn't mean they're different gods necessarily. And there's this vast net of consciousness and life that permeates all of reality. So let's just start off with that basic baseline. It might not sound basic, but that's a basic baseline. Okay, so my baseline would be Hinduism, which is more of a culture than a religion, because there is no one book that you have to believe in Hinduism. It's more of a culture of exchange, of enlightenment, of liberation, and really sharing the love for the oneness that everything is a part of. These are basic concepts. But okay, I have my baseline of Hinduism. The next stage is, and we'll put a 1 next to baseline. 2 is expanding belief. And now, what do I mean by expanding belief? Expanding belief basically means that I enhance my knowledge on Hinduism, on this religion that I've chosen to be a part of, that makes sense to me, to understand really how consciousness works on its different levels. For instance, how it works differently in human beings and animals and material. How these different levels of consciousness, the higher up you go, the more not only sentient and self-aware, but you can even go into higher dimensions where beings that have such a high frequency of consciousness can only exist in higher dimensions until you finally reach the spirit beyond creation. You go through the astral realm, the causal realm, then you reach the spirit beyond creation and complete unification with God. And all of creation, whether it be this creation, this material universe, the astral realm, and the causal realm, these are all actually a smaller part of God. God is infinite beyond that. It's kind of like a part of God, all of those things. Now, expanding my knowledge on that, and expanding how other people worship different forms of God, different functions of God, and worship God in general. Start using those techniques, whether it be certain mantras, certain techniques of meditation, certain techniques of puja, worship and action in worship. Developing these techniques and using them, and reaching an understanding of my own soul, my own center, and thus extending my knowledge and contact with the souls of everything, the soul that is basically behind everything. And the different souls are what we perceive in Maya, which is illusion, which is the only reason why we see ourselves as separate from God. Now, okay, I'm expanding my belief. And through this expansion of belief, through these details, I started to realize that every piece of this makes sense, which is a good sign. If you're in Hinduism or another religion, it doesn't really make sense over time. And as you break it down, as you learn more and more about whether it be consciousness, that religion's understanding of God, that religion's understanding of a prophet or a Messiah or avatar, if it doesn't start to click for you, if it doesn't make sense in the grander scheme of things when you try to perceive it, keep on expanding, but also keep in mind that maybe that's not the path for you. Now, this never happened for me in Hinduism because it all made sense. So, expanding belief. As you always continue to expand your belief, your understanding of the different beliefs in that religion, but also different practices and different viewpoints within any religion, because there's never just one viewpoint. There's never just even if you just follow one book in a certain religion, there's never just one interpretation of that book. So you can approach it through many different avenues. So you will constantly expand, and even if you follow a certain avenue, you will expand your understanding and that understanding's relation to yourself and how you have a relationship with God, and that relationship will expand as well. But the third stage is basically working towards chosen spiritual goals and use of worship. Now, what do I mean by working towards chosen spiritual goals? In Hinduism, it's working towards greater levels of liberation, greater levels of understanding, usually achieved by meditation, puja, prayer, through study. There are many different avenues. You can create yoga, hatha yoga, jnana yoga, knowledge yoga, which is more of a knowledge expansion, but it can also be a more yogic, there's a more yogic side of it, of course, and bhakti yoga, which is devotion yoga. There's a whole bunch of different avenues in Hinduism that you might follow one particular avenue. Raja yoga, action yoga, acting correctly along the lines of your belief system, along the lines of virtue, dharma, the moral code and fabric of the universe. But if you're, let's say, if you're a Christian, if you're a Baptist, you might pray more. You might study the Bible more. You might go to Bible meetings. You might go to church more often and participate in functions where you are trying to expand your understanding of God, but also your love for God, and trying to feel that love that God has for you. And I'm using like a Baptist example. But this really works with any religion. Working towards chosen spiritual goals. So really, there should, in any religion, if you don't find a path to expand your love for God, your connection to God, your connection to your soul, your understanding, your enlightenment in general, then either you need to expand more on your belief, or you might want to consider other either avenues within that religion, or start looking at other religions if you just don't find a satisfactory path to where you can start to have a spiritual goal and a spiritual progression that you can work towards, and you can work towards along not just a guided path, but an individual path. Now, that kind of goes with use of worship. Your worship techniques should expand your understanding. They should expand your connection to your soul. You should feel it. You should feel uplifted. You should feel more solid emotionally. You should feel more able to approach problems from your own religion's viewpoint of it. Like if you encounter violent people in the world, you should be able to either try to talk them down and be more peaceful. If, like, I'm a Hindu, so try to be more peaceful. Try to not encourage that kind of consciousness, the violent consciousness, the aggressive consciousness. And that's one of the reasons why I am one of the Hindus that don't eat meat as a vegetarian. Many other Hindus are vegetarian as well. I don't know the percentage, but that's a big thing in Hinduism: not causing harm, not embracing that violent and aggressive culture of slaughtering animals, basically. But that's how we use that idea of nonviolence, is not to eat meat, not to support basically slaughterhouses or slaughterhouse chains or marketing that causes death, the unnecessary death of animals. Now that's one use of worship. If you are a conservative Christian, you might, as much as I don't necessarily agree, you might try to protest abortion clinics. I've seen that done before. You might try to march for the idea of creationism in schools. It all feels very political if I'm going to a far right version of Christianity, but I'm seeing that more and more, so that's why I'm using it as an example. And that's very external. So there is most people in the world use a very external means of practicing their worship. They don't like to look within. That's fairly there's a much smaller population that actually looks within, but that population is growing. More people are being awakened. More people are awakening themselves, and everyone should have a means to awaken themselves. That's why I follow the path that I do. But if you're looking at a conservative Christian as well, but how do you work towards those goals within and not just politically, or religio-political, however you want to say it. You pray quite a bit. Work off of the lessons of Jesus. Read the Psalms. Sing in church, of course. And walk through nature. Try to understand God's creation. And I'm still using the Christian conservative example. That's a way to work within with Jesus Christ if you go towards that current. Now, so we have 3 steps. Baseline Hinduism for me. Expanding belief, step 2. Working towards chosen spiritual goals and use of worship. Step 3, 4. Practice constantly and have patience. Now, in favor of making this across the board for, all religions is what I'm trying to do here. I have basically made this very vague, and it's very much connected to the previous step. Practice constantly, which means, like I said, working with your worship, using your worship techniques over and over again. So constantly practice more and more. Prayer, meditation, study, mantras for if you're Hindu, basically puja, which there's a lot more ritual actions in Hinduism than most other religions. But and if you're Muslim, you constantly bow down to God, towards Mecca, every time of day that is necessary, and you don't eat pork, but Hindus don't eat meat in general. Just constantly practice your spiritual or religious faith, and the last part of that doesn't kind of combine with the previous thing is patience. Now, before you switch to a completely different avenue within your religion or move to another religion, which shouldn't happen very often, you have to have patience. Before you allow doubt in any regard to enter your heart, you should always have patience with what you're doing. You should give everything all the patience you can muster. And if it's the right path for you, the patience will pay off. It'll bloom into to a great practice, to a great understanding of where you are, of who God is, and your connection to God. You should feel it. It should be a very tangible feeling within yourself, within your heart, within your mind, within your understanding that your connection to God is increasing. But if you don't feel like it is increasing, patience is very important. Now, in favor of not making this too complicated and making it kind of trans-religious, I'm going to leave the 4 steps that I have here there. And I hope you enjoyed this very short, small presentation on the different stages of belief. These are just the stages that I kind of went through, that I work with, and based on my experience. So thank you very much for watching. Feel free to continue the conversation in the comments section below, and y'all have a great day.